Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to talk about massive cost saving in Azure, and I will try to address three key ways by which you can do that. That is not the only way to save cost in Azure. So these are the three important ways to save the cost. So what are they? So first, we'll talk about Azure hybrid benefit. I'll explain about it, but in a nutshell, what it says that how do you reuse your existing license on Azure? And then we'll talk about Azure reservation. So when you are sure about it, that the resource you're going to use it for longer period of time, uninterrupted, never going to delete it, then this is the right choice. Third, but not the least, is that savings plan. So we call it as Azure savings plan. I'll try to explain all of them. So what essentially we mean by this, let's start with this. So when you buy license from Microsoft, you can have a license through something called as software assurance, we call it SA, and there are a couple of other ways by which you can buy license, and I'll show you how you can find out what are the ways by which you can buy license which can be applied in Azure. So software assurance is one such way where you basically buy license in bulk. It goes for 3 years, and any point in time during the tenure of that contract, if the software gets upgraded, you get a free upgrade copy of that software. So you can consider having a Windows license which you own, or you can consider having a SQL Server license, right? So and you may be creating virtual machine in Azure which runs on Windows and has a SQL on top of that, right? So you're basically running a SQL database on top of Windows. And what this virtual machine is basically telling us is that it has number of X number of CPU and Y number of RAM. And based on the family you select, you pay Z number of value, dollar value, right? So that's the final thing. And this consists of the hardware cost and the software cost all hourly. So you pay SQL, you pay Windows, you pay CPU and RAM, and definitely storage. So this total cost includes all the value, and I'll show you how you can identify what each of these component really costs you from our Azure calculator. But you imagine that you are paying hourly license. That's the catch here. Okay. So for the Windows and SQL you're using. But if you are an organization who already have purchased these licenses for your workload, either on premises or even in some other public cloud or your private cloud, right? You can continue to use them in Azure. So you can say that I'm going to use my on-premises license to Azure. So you are allowed to do that. And that is when we call it as Azure Hybrid Benefit. As the name suggests, you can use on-premises, you can buy for on-premises and use it in the cloud, and that has got some conditions. Okay, so let's dive deeper into that and understand a bit more in terms of how this really works out. Okay, so let me go back to my presentation, and I'm going to share one screen with you. So let me do that. And if you notice here in this screen, if I go ahead and uh, walk you through this Azure Hybrid Benefit, it's easy to find this document. You just go to the search and you type Azure Hybrid Benefit. You get into this first link, you go here, and this is the hybrid benefit. Okay, and it says that it is either Windows Server or SQL Server core licenses with software assurance or subscription. So this is the option available to you. And just to understand what is the savings you can get, there's a nice little calculator given in this documentation to help you understand what could be the significant cost you might encounter with. So if you say that, if I go ahead and increase this number to 100 virtual machine I'm going to create, which is Windows Server virtual machine, and that runs 730 hours per month, which means all day throughout, and it runs on 8 core. Let's go with the D8S V5, and then it is 8 core 32 gigabyte RAM, and it is costing me around $0.8 an hour. And if you see here, it clearly calls out without Azure Hybrid benefit per month, you're going to pay $7,000 approximately. If you use the Azure Hybrid benefit, that means the Windows licensing cost will not come to your hourly bill. You'll end up paying 3,800. That's the saving. So it's almost like 45% savings you're getting by applying Azure Hybrid benefit if you have purchased those licenses on those suggested ways and can reuse that in Azure. Now, that's what your annual savings looks like. So you can easily identify, like, probably after a couple of years, your license cost is kind of recovered um, if you don't pay the license cost in Azure anymore. So why do pay double when you are owning the license is the idea here. So if you have purchased once, use it so that you don't have to pay again. If you look into the SQL Server virtual machine, so when you install SQL Server in a virtual machine, right, you go ahead and then try to calculate this thing. Let's say I want to use this SQL Server Enterprise Edition and SQL Server, how many Enterprise Editions, let's say minimum 2, I'm going to use. You can see that eligible number of virtual machine is 0. You need at least 8 core in the license of the software. So it basically tells you, like, um, it is basically you are eligible for Enterprise Edition vCore for every one SQL Server Enterprise Edition license vCore, one Standard Edition vCore for every one SQL Server Standard Edition license core. So it is how they calculate. So if you buy SQL Server license for 8 core, it becomes 8 vCore in Azure. So you basically need to give this minimum 8 vCore. So let's just give it 8 vCore. And then you can choose the region because the pricing could vary depending on the region you select. And if you run on Windows and you run on, let's say, DS4, D8SV5, because that's the 8 core machine, right? So let's just choose that latest one, SSD drive, all this fine. And then you can save up to 85% over standard pay-as-you-go rate by leveraging Windows Server SQL Server licenses with Azure Hybrid benefit. So you can see that you can just check the checkbox and you just are eligible virtual machine with SQL Server Enterprise license on your instance. Selection is 1, right? So if you increase this number to 16, let's say, and you can see that it goes to 2 virtual machines. So if you are having a SQL Server database, I assume that you will have a redundancy for high availability or sort of like a always on kind of setup where you might be running 2 instances of the SQL Server in 2 different virtual machines, which essentially translates into 16 core, that is 2 virtual machine with SQL Server Enterprise Edition based on the instance selection. So you can see that I selected 8 core virtual machine. If I select 16 core virtual machine, let's say DS60, D16S. So if I just go ahead, this one, before that is 16 core. So I can only get up to 1 virtual machine here. I cannot change that. So I need to make it 32 cores. So I basically will be spending SQL Server license as a 32 core license, right? So they basically, that's something you need to understand, that you are running this SQL Server in Azure based on the number of cores you are selecting for the instance. If you select the lower core, it can actually be more number of virtual machines, so vice versa. So if you buy, let's say, a SQL license of 32 core and you can build a single virtual machine of 32 core, you would basically end up eating all your license quota, right? So that's the idea here, which basically tells you kind of like this kind of thing which you are going to do that right in a moment. And then if I go ahead and let's say drill down further a bit more to give you an idea, like SQL Server is not just for virtual machine, but also for managed instances, and etc. So if you're using SQL Server managed instance, you can continue to use your version, like either it's a standard edition or an enterprise edition, and then you can select the Gen 5 and you can choose the number of cores you want to run. Let's say if you are going to run 16 core, and then I say that I want to use one enterprise to zero this thing, and then you can at least 16 core machine, right? It's saying that you need at least 16 core licenses of that. So let me just put 16 here. So it becomes 16 core licenses, 16 core instance, and then I can, let's say, go up to a single instance general purpose in based on the instance selection. So all this calculation happens. But the interesting part is that, let's say you are not using your hybrid benefit or the existing license, or you don't own it. So you need probably end up paying $13,000 per month, versus if you own a license, you end up paying something around 8.5K per month dollar value. So it's a rough calculation, not exactly at par, but it gives you an idea about like the amount of savings you can make over a period of time. Same thing applies with the Azure SQL database, where basically you have got a SQL running in a platform as service mode, where everything is managed for you, but you can still continue to use your SQL license if you own any, and can save significant amount of cost while running SQL Server as Azure SQL database, right? So that's the PaaS version. Now coming to the next part, which is most interesting. So let me just switch to my white board. Let me quickly do that. Uh, then I'm gonna go ahead and share my whiteboard. And if I may open that whiteboard again and tell you like what exactly we are trying to do over here. So if I now, let's say, clean this up, I'm going to talk about a bit more to give you a recap around what is reservation. Imagine a scenario where you created a virtual machine which is running your domain controller. Okay, a typical setup. Imagine you have a virtual machine um, which is running your SQL or DB, any DB in a virtual machine. It could be Oracle, it could be MySQL, it could be PostgreSQL, anything which runs on a virtual machine and never goes down. So these are the kind of virtual machine which runs 24-hour, 365 days, non-stop. So you can understand that this is kind of guaranteed. This gives you an assurance. Yes, I know if I do a rough calculation like 730 hour a month, which essentially means that into 12 is whatever that value is, and then you end up calculating I think it is 87, something of that sort. So if you calculate that value, I need to check, but if you calculate that value, right, this is the total number of hours you're gonna run these virtual machine. And if you, let's say, multi-year project for 5 year at least, you're not going to shut down your DC. Maybe for a short maintenance, but immediately will reboot. So it is going to run these many hours into 5. So you are for sure, at least out of, let's say, X amount of VM you are running in this workload, these two are not going to go away. Okay, there could be other kind of a VM which you might be using, let's say, which might go down. Let's say you have got application behind a load balancer sitting on a virtual machine, and they can get shut down due to the load maintenance, etc. So you're not considering all of this virtual machine, but you are just considering key important virtual machines which are kind of um, will never ever go down. Okay, they're not ephemeral virtual machine. Let's put it that way. They're permanent into the solution. In those cases, what you can say to Azure, like, hey Azure, you know what? I have chosen D16S V5, which stands for you have got 16 core machine, okay, D series, which are running. Just a quick example, and then I'm gonna block to D16S V5 for 3 years. Okay, straight away, Microsoft will slash your price to something like 60%. It's enough rough figure. Okay, it could vary here and there, but you understand that if you are, example, this imaginary number, if you're paying something around $100 per month, now you will be paying around $65. So you just multiply that number with the monthly cost, it is a significant amount for sure. So you're going to save a lot of money by reserving this capacity for a period of time. So you can reserve it for 1 year, 3 year. 3 year is the best option, right? So we always recommend that 3 year. Go for 3 year, you will get more benefit. Now, I want to show you that in a documentation and in our calculator to really demonstrate what is the cost saving looks like. Okay, so let me switch to my uh, portal, and in that I'm gonna go ahead and open a search box, and I say Azure reservations. So one thing which I didn't really talk about is that what else you can reserve. So there are other things you can reserve, right? So I go and open the Azure reservation official documentation here from Microsoft, which essentially tells me that what are the kind of reservation options I can buy, etc. So I'm not going to go through each of these things, but I want to actually cover this part um, because I don't remember all of these things which are listed in this list. But let me call that out. You just not can use the virtual machine for reservation, but you can also use things like storage, Cosmos DB, SQL database, which is PaaS, Databricks, MySQL PaaS, PostgreSQL PaaS, MariaDB PaaS, Data Explorer, Redis, dedicated host, and so on and so forth. So you can see that you have got plenty of options available. Now let me also show you the significant saving you might get. So if I say Azure cost calculator, so we sometimes call it a pricing calculator also. So I'll just say that pricing calculator. I open the pricing calculator and I'm gonna, let's say, choose the virtual machine, easy to calculate. And if I just add that to the list right at the below, you will find that virtual machine is added. And one of the things I wanted to show you over here is that if you choose WestUS, Windows, operating system, standard, and then choose this size as D16S V5, that's the good choice for 16 core machine. Um, 64 GB RAM. And then you can see that it gives you a couple of options. The Azure hybrid benefit is something we'll omit in this discussion now. But if you focus on this area where it basically says that you're going to go ahead and create something called reservations or reserved instances, either 1 year or 3 year. Okay. So if you choose, let's say, um, 1 year, 3 year, let's say I choose 3 year and I choose how I want to pay. So generally people prefer to pay monthly. It reduces to something like a $785. If I don't do it, then I end up paying $1,191 per month for this virtual machine. If I go ahead and reserve it for 3 years, I end up paying a monthly cost of $785. So you multiply that number of reservations you're going to make is the savings you're going to make. And this reservation, by the way, is not the reservation for your operating system. So you don't get any discount in the operating system license cost if you reserve it. So just remember that. To make it simple, let's choose Linux, which doesn't cost you anything from a license perspective. So if you see the bare metal VM, that VM which holds no operating system cost as a license costs you around $385 per month for D16 V5 machine, right? And then if you reserve it, it costs you around 248. So the lesser the price is, the gap between the reservation and the actual pay as you go cost becomes lower. But if you go for a larger VM like M series, etc., especially in the SAP kind of world where you need larger VMs, databases, and then file servers and all those things which you typically maintain as a legacy of workload, might be saving a lot of money for you if you go for that, right? So you can reserve a lot of stuff if you go for a reservation, and you can see that I not only can reserve a virtual machine, but I can reserve many other things. I can reserve Databricks, I can reserve a MySQL database, I can reserve MySQL reserved vCore, right? It's a PaaS database. There are many things which you can reserve, and then you can go for the reservation here, right? So that's the reservation, 1 year, 3 year, and in the pricing calculator, you can easily calculate what that might cost you if you go for the reservation and tell you upfront like what exactly it means to you. All right. Now moving on to the third part of this thing where we wanted to discuss a little more about like third option, third major option available while you consider savings for your organization. Savings is the key thing because every organization internally have been asked to reduce the IT operating cost, and you are the responsible person to drive that conversation with your end user, with your community, right? So you are probably doing it every day now. So it is probably helpful for you to really understand what Azure really offers from a high level perspective, but then go deeper into that and fine tune many more other optimization options. We run something called cost optimization as a well architected framework review, which covers end-to-end possibilities of saving a single penny. And I highly encourage you to really leverage that. You can also run your own. So we have questionnaires available in public, which can help you do that. Having said that, let me just say Azure saving plan. That's what we're going to discuss. That's the third point. Okay. So if I say Azure savings plan, which essentially means that I'm going to choose um, something where I'm going to talk about, let's say I am going to commit, let's say $5 per hour for 3 years. What it means, imagine that you have got some virtual machine running, and this is the $5 mark. Okay, so this is where that $5 comes in. So okay, and then if you look here, into this, you might be running a virtual machine here, which basically end up using all $5. So that's total compute, not just virtual machine, but many other things. We'll talk about it. This is for, let's say, first month. Okay, this is the first month. So let's say that's a month, and then in the second month, let's say you probably used it more. Okay, that's the usage. So you end up paying $5 for this, and this X amount, that's X dollar, this pay as you go. So you can think of like pay as you go price. So this whole block is pay as you go price, which you need to pay because you have exceeded the commit, right? You can even have a situation where you might be using lower. Let's say in the month of December when people are enjoying their holiday period, your business is kind of lean. And in that period, you might end up spending $4 cost for your compute. So this gap is still the gap. So you will be paying total 5. It's a loss for you. So which means that you are paying $1 more than your usage, but you saved in other months when it is being consumed completely. So it's a calculation, it's an observation you have to make over a period of time to take a call. There are advisor recommendations available, so you can take the Azure advisor recommendation and you can consider what is the right choice for you, right? So this is month, this is CPU hour, how much time it is running, and this is for compute. When I say compute, it essentially add, so who are they? So who are covered here? It could be a function app. So when you run function app in premium, you can be, it can be app service in premium. It can be VM, definitely virtual machine. It can be AKS. It is today not visible in the pricing calculator, just a call out, but I'm sure that it is covered because behind the scene it uses virtual machine. There could be like dedicated host. Okay, so these are the kind of services which you can consider. And you will get to see that in the pricing calculator who has that capability or not beyond the documentation available to you. So let me switch to the thing and then show you how you can buy this and then how you can actually uh, see who all gives you how much benefit. Now, let me call this out that if you have the maximum saving is the RI. So RI is the maximum saving you get. And then you get savings plan that is little. So when you apply an RI to a family of VM, it applies first. So the RI calculation happens because you're going to save more by applying RI. It's a billing calculation. So all these things which we talked about doesn't really change anything technically into the system. So if you have deployed a virtual machine, let's say 3 months down the line, you apply an RI, nothing changes to your technical solution. It is only billing calculation, a little bit of math which kicks in, which does this back calculation and sees that RI is there, adjusted that cost. So instead of $100, it shows $65. Okay, that's the thing which happens. It's pure billing calculation which happens. When RI is applied to a VM, then savings plan is not applied to that VM because it's the hierarchy how it applies. Because you can save more in RI, that's bigger, and that's smaller. Okay, and then you basically end up having that. Okay, so let me switch to the presentation to the screen, and then I'm gonna share my um, portal and show you that option. All right, So let me go ahead and go back to this Azure savings plan. These are all public documentation available to you for your quick reference, and you can see that it talks a lot of things about saving plan, who can do what, right? So I can just go to this, let's say, home page, talk about various different things, right? So how the discount is applied, right? So you all see all of them, but let's see the practicality of it. If I go to the pricing calculator, you remember that I selected D16SV5, and then I chose that 3-year RI. So I'll say I'll go ahead with the pay-as-you-go model. Linux is fine because the reservation um, and the savings plan doesn't give any discount for the operating system license. So I chose Linux for the sake of, let's say, quick calculation. But you can imagine that if you are running Windows, you have to end up paying the whole duration hourly license cost depending on how much time you're running that. If you notice here in this section, you have got something like this. So you have this one, which says that you have a savings plan. So if you apply savings plan for 3 years, it straight away gives you 47% discount. Okay, and even the 3-year RI gives you 62% discount. So you can see that it's a significant change. So RI is always the bigger one, okay, versus the savings plan. So wherever possible, and if you're sure that resource is not going to get shut down or get deleted, go for RI. Okay, that's the tip. Wherever you are not sure, you go for the savings plan, because savings plan has got a couple of facilities, flexibilities. I didn't call it out. One is that savings plan is at subscription level. No matter which region you create your computer resource, like AKS, ACI, that is Azure Container Instances, app services, function app, virtual machine, dedicated host, it will be applied all across within that subscription, right? RI is very region specific, very family specific, right? You have to say what you are doing, and within that range of those resources you'd supply. It is all throughout. So if you're using, let's say, premium function tier or premium app service, it will be applied even if there is no VM. But if you create an RI for VM and then you run no VM into your system, you end up paying money for no resources, right? So you reserve for something, but you are not using it, but you still have to pay that. So that's the flexibility you get in the savings plan if you compare that one-on-one with RI. Now let's see how it looks like. So recall the number 650, okay? Easy to remember. And then if you apply 3-year RI, it straight away becomes 374. Okay, so that's the 3-year savings plan we are talking about. Now what this saving plan does, both like monthly and then upfront, and you can see that it basically is a fixed hourly commit you want to make things. So let me quickly see if I can open this portal. And if I say so, where is the portal? Okay. If I say savings plan, comes here in the sub portal under the subscription, so you can buy it from here. So you can say purchase now. Okay, I give a name, and then you can see that I don't think I have got rights to do that. My subscription is not something which I can do. It doesn't allow this kind of subscription, but it's fine, right? Just notice this area which I'm going to highlight, and then if I just notice, if you notice here, right, only in the subscription, specific resource group in the selected subscription, a management group level also you can apply. You can apply 3-year or 1 year, okay? And then you can commit the hourly thing. So you can say that $50, $100, $500, what is that hourly call? And then your billing frequency becomes monthly or upfront. Okay, so it's like this way, you're gonna go ahead and apply for the RI through your Azure portal. And once you say review and buy, goes ahead and buys that. I have never experienced that because I do not have rights to do it. Okay, but in a nutshell, you can see that it basically allows you to have a ballpark figure which combines all sort of um, virtual machine types, right? So you can see that compute type rather, and then you can go ahead and then apply them all in cost saving plan, right? So it basically also recommends you something, right? So you can get a recommendation through Azure Advisor. So I'm not sure if you're using Azure Advisor, but if you don't use Azure Advisor, I recommend that you go ahead and check for it. It's a free service available in Azure, which tells you not only the cost saving, but also reliability and security and all different pillars of Azure Advisor. So sometimes people ask, like, I don't know what all resources I'm running in my subscription. It's so complex. Can you tell me what are the best resources I can think of saving some cost? This is the answer, Azure Advisor. Go and browse the Azure Advisor. It will tell you what are the VMs, depending on the last 90 days of log, can be potential candidate for your reservation, for your 3-year reservation, etc. So with this, I want to end and then want to recap on things which we covered so that we understand what we discussed. So let me go back here into my first phase of this presentation where we talked about three things. So we have discussed Azure Hybrid Benefit, we have discussed Azure Reservation, we have discussed Saving Plan. So it could be a confusing term, the Saving Plan, which means that what is the difference between reservation and saving plan? Um, they may look simple, same, but they are not, because Azure Saving Plan does give you a lot of flexibility in terms of total compute use over multiple region into a single subscription, whereas reservation is very specific, but gives you more savings. So if you are 101% sure about it, go for Azure Reservation. If you're still having a bit of doubt, go for Azure Savings Plan. So with this, I want to thank you and have a great savings in Azure.